What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Nintendo Land. A couple of weeks ago, we made a video on the worst boss battle in every single Kirby game ever, with a total of 26 different Kirby games. Well, today we're doing quite the opposite, trying to find the best boss battle in every single Kirby game. But before we get started, there is some criteria to note. First off, a big one, there will be no final bosses or final boss segments that include multiple bosses in a row at the end of the game. Lots of the time, this includes King Dedede before going on to the other final boss, so those won't be included either. So any final boss from any different game modes as well, like Kirby Superstar's extra game modes, none of those final bosses will be included, as I want to save all the final bosses for a separate list. There will also be no games that only have one boss battle, like Kirby's Dream Course, and no puzzle games are included as well. Also, real quick, a lot of you watching this video right now are not yet subscribed, so if you enjoy videos like this, definitely let me know, because more would come. Just let me know by leaving a like and subscribing. And also, we are very close to 300,000 subscribers, so let's see if we can get to at least 280 by the end of this video. Thank you so much for tuning in, and let's jump into the list. Starting off the list with Kirby's Dream Land, I picked Kabula. Now, Kabula was a lot different than any other boss battles in this game, and it kind of changed up the gameplay very differently. It turned the game into a side-scroller shoot-'em-up where Kirby's just blasting puffs of air at the giant blimp and dodging its bullet attacks, and I actually thought this was kind of unique for the game back then, and I thought it was an awesome boss fight, believe it or not, and it had some difficulty for sure, as lots of the bullet paths were very strayed and you could get hit at any second if you weren't paying attention. Next up, we have Kirby's Adventure, and I absolutely love Mr. Shine and Mr. Bright. Yes, I know a lot of people would probably say Meta Knight, and I can completely see why, but Mr. Shine and Mr. Bright was just so unique to me. I loved how it was two different bosses that worked together in coordination, as one was dropping down to the ground trying to attack you, and one would attack you up in the background as well. I loved how you had to use the attacks from the other to hit his partner, which I thought was really cool, and overall, I really enjoyed this boss battle. It was different and something that we really haven't seen that much throughout the entire series even today. And let me just add to the fact that the world changes depending on if Mr. Shine or Mr. Bright is in the background, and I absolutely love the day and night cycles that it includes. This is just such a great boss battle. Now, Kirby's Pinball Land doesn't give you a whole lot to choose from, but I would definitely go Kracko. You start off fighting Kracko Jr., and it's pretty basic for the most part, but then Kracko is unleashed, where he can also shoot lightning at one of your bumpers, preventing it from moving. It's not a crazy boss battle by any means, but I guess as far as Kirby's Pinball Land goes, without including the final boss, this one would definitely be the best. For Kirby's Dream Land 2, I was kind of stuck between two different boss battles. Mr. Shine and Mr. Bright returns, and they're just as fun as they were originally. It just doesn't feel as aesthetically good as the original, but you also have Kracko / Kracko Jr. I really love how it's like a part 1 and a part 2 with Kracko Jr. and Kracko Jr. has some really cool, unique attacks here, where he can actually put his eyeball into the clouds and try to hit you from underneath, which is something we really don't see again in the series. So yeah, both of these boss battles are really good in this game, so it's really hard for me to pick just one, and it's going to be like that a lot with a lot of these bosses. For Kirby's Block Ball, I chose Cappy, and Cappy's one of the very first bosses of the entire game, but I think it's handled very well. You first have to hit the Cappy a couple times in order to split it into multiple duplicates and take his mushroom top off. And once you do so, you have to take out the middle Cappy that's surrounded by little ones. You can take out the little ones in order to make it easier on yourself, but yeah, trying to get the ball in between them is also a very difficult task, but it's a fun concept for a boss battle, and I really like the design of this one. For it being one of the first bosses in the entire game, it really did a good job. Next up, we have Kirby Superstar / Superstar Ultra, and I'm telling you right now, Computer Virus was one of the coolest things I ever saw when I was a kid. It kind of threw me off completely, even before what I knew what an RPG was. This is literally an RPG boss fight in a Kirby game, and it's one of the only ones we have ever gotten, and it's so good to see the different characters to pop up and their different attack patterns, also their different stats. It has their life, it also has like a little message board that kind of tells you what's happening in the battle, and I just love everything about this boss battle. It's so quirky and so weird, but it fits the game perfectly, and it's something that's super original. But I also want to include another boss battle in this, which is Meta Knight, which I feel like is a very good boss fight against Meta Knight, and I like a lot better than the originals, because it actually feels like he's attacking and moving, and you can actually clang swords a lot more. I don't know, it feels like a proper sword battle compared to the OG Kirby games that actually had you fighting Meta Knight. But this could also be seen as a final boss of the Halberd, so technically it's like a final boss of that specific mode, so it's hard to say, but I definitely wanted to include him in this list because he definitely needs to be there. It's an iconic boss fight for sure. For Kirby's Dream Land 3, I chose Adeline because it's like a whole bunch of mini bosses in one. It's like a little boss gauntlet that she throws at you, and I don't know, I thought this was pretty cool. The fact that her paintings are coming to life and giving you full-purpose boss battles, I thought was unique and something different compared to the rest of the bosses in this game, so I really like this. Like, let me say, there are a lot of boss battles here. You'll fight Mr. Shine and Mr. Bright again, which of course I love. You'll also see Kracko return in this boss fight, and you'll even fight Sweet Stuff for some reason. Yeah, that might be the drawback, but still, it's an incredible boss battle, believe it or not, for this game. For Kirby's Crystal Shards, I was once again stuck between two. The first one being HRH, which is this giant mech that tries to attack Kirby, and you have to attack its hands as it's trying to attack you from the background. And then for part 2, it transforms into some type of hovercraft. It's trying to grab you and blow you up with missiles, and I just really love this boss battle, and I love the whole futuristic aspect of it. But another one that I thought was very interesting that I know a lot of people had problems with and hate is Miracle Matter. I thought it was super unique to have like 8 different elemental attacks that you have to use in order to hit itself with, and I thought that was really unique to have that many different attacks that you had to dodge and remember. And even though it was just like this floating element, but I still thought it was a fun concept and I had a blast with it. Kirby's Tilt and Tumble barely makes this list because it only has 2 bosses outside of the final boss being Kracko and the Observer. In the last list we said Kracko because it's just kind of a floating shoot 'em up that's really boring and slow, so I guess we're gonna have to go Observer. So the key here is to roll Kirby into one of these 4 pits on the corner of the arena and blast him up into the air in order to land on the eyeball in the center of the Observer. You'll fight him multiple times, so I'm not going to pick an in particular one that's better than the rest, but it just kind of slightly changes up the arena by adding traps and spikes or even making it full of ice, making it harder to move Kirby around. But yep, that's pretty much the general gist of the boss fight. As he's trying to bump you around the arena, your job is just to land on his eyeball, and it's okay, but yeah, it's kind of all we have to go off of here. Then for Kirby's Nightmare in Dreamland, we could go Meta Knight once again, that is an option, but I gotta go my boys, Mr. Shine and Mr. Bright. It's just such a unique concept, and I'm glad that they brought it back, obviously, in this sort of remake of Kirby's Adventure. Next up, we have Kirby's Amazing Mirror, and I chose Mega Titan and Master / Crazy Hands. So Mega Titan is really unique because it's not just wailing on the boss, you actually have to push him into the electric beams on the side of the walls, and you have to knock him down in order for him to take damage. Now, he also has a part 2 where his head flies around the arena, and you have to take out his head as it's firing missiles at you, which I thought was pretty unique. But Master and Crazy Hands is just so cool, and obviously being in Smash Brothers just makes it even better, but these things are pretty incredible. Yeah, it's a Crazy Hand and a Master Hand fighting you at the same time, and their moves are very similar to that of Smash Brothers. Firing finger guns or just trying to punch or smack or even flick you across the stage, which can make it a kind of difficult boss battle at times. Next up for Kirby's Canvas Curse, there's only a couple boss battles, 3 technically, and I chose Kracko because I like Kracko better than Kracko Jr., where it feels like that's more luck-based. With Kracko, you actually had to break parts of his cloud barrier in order to get to his eyeball, which can be a lot more fun than just trying to force your way in between Kracko Jr.'s little floating orbs around him. So this one was definitely my favorite. Kirby Squeak Squad, we have Mecha Kracko, which I thought was really unique for a Kracko boss fight because it was very long and a lot more intense. There were tons of more attacks, and the stage itself even became harder as there were giant gaps in the clouds, so if you had something in Kirby's mouth and you fell through the gap, you were automatically dead unless you could spit it out in time. But yeah, this boss battle could definitely be difficult, and it's a spin on a classic boss that we fought time and time again, and I actually thought it wasn't that bad at all. Look, I'm so sorry for having so many that have 2 bosses that I picked, but I mean, sometimes it's just so worth it. For Kirby's Epic Yarn, I chose, yes, Meta Knight. I know a lot of people love that boss battle, and I'll get into that in a second, but I also think a very underrated one was Kapamari. The whole untwirling and unraveling part of this game is already so much fun, so a whole boss battle built around it where you had to just continuously unravel the top of the squid's head is so much fun as you're avoiding his tentacles and just kind of moving around the underwater stage. This is just part 1 of a 2-part battle, because in part 2, he actually goes into a different form where he's popping out of different jars, and he also hides in the ink, which means you have to pull his tentacles that surround you and throw the ball of yarn at wherever his eyes are to kind of show you where he's hiding from, and then you get to yank him and pull him across the stage. It's just so good. Of course, the Meta Knight boss battle is really good as well, where he gets 4 different colored yarn swords, and they have different attacks, where you have to actually grab the waves of attacks in order to knock him down with it, and then pull the sword out of his hand, where he'll then go to exchange for a new one in the center of the stage. I like this boss battle a lot, but I still think Kapamari is slightly better simply due to the fact that this one can be very quick if you know what you're doing. Kirby's Mass Attack has a lot of mini bosses, but not a whole lot of main bosses, but the one I definitely wanted to choose was Skull Lord, because I love the whole aspect of this. Your job is to protect all the ground barriers below you, which means means if they break, your Kirbys die. You have to block all the incoming rocks that are falling from the sky, and also you have to carry this giant bucket around catching all the lava rocks. Then the game will allow you to blast towards him in the background, where it turns into kind of a Donkey Kong Country style cannon blast where you have to blast him in his soft spot on his head, which is just a really cool boss battle. There's a lot that goes into this, and it's a very long one too. There was no hesitation for Kirby's Return to Dreamland. I immediately went straight to Metal Generals / HRD3. I think both of these in a combination when you fight the X version is so well made. I love fighting Metal General and then boom, out of the background this giant robot shows up, and there's so many different phases and parts of beating him just executed really well. It has tons of really powerful and really fun to dodge attacks, including a whole part 2 of the giant robot stage where he goes from the background into the actual foreground where you're actually at, and he's trying to cover the entire stage pretty much, and you have to move very carefully to not get squashed or ran over. You're doing this all while watching the machine slowly break apart into pieces. You can see pieces and bolts fly off, and even the plating of it. It's just a really well put together boss battle, and I enjoyed this a lot. I wish it was just part of the main story, which would have made it even more cool to see it the first time. For Kirby's Triple Deluxe, I wanted to choose Mass DDD, but I'm not entirely sure if this would be included as one of the final boss segments. And yes, it is followed by tons of other final bosses with Queen Sectonia and then the flower version of her, so it's really impossible to say. So for the sake of this video, I'm going to move on and say Coily Rattler. I think the bosses in Triple Deluxe aren't anything super special, but I thought Coily Rattler was pretty cool. I like the different segments that fly off of him, and he like throws the pieces of his own body at you from the background, and I just love the way he moves around the stage. Just so many different aspects of the stage that he uses to crawl around, and I just thought it was pretty cool. It does make it a little harder in order to land your attacks because you have a short window each time, but I thought this boss battle was definitely unique and different. A giant robot snake, sign me up. Next up we have Kirby in the Rainbow Curse, and I chose Sky High Wispy Woods. This one's interesting because you're not just hitting Wispy Woods, you have to power Kirby up first. By collecting a certain amount of stars, you can power Kirby up. So you have to go throughout the stage collecting stars and dodging any type of oncoming attacks or the spiked balls on the vines. Once Kirby has his power, you have to lead him to smash into the face of Wispy Woods, which will do some serious damage. And I just love his face when he gets absolutely clobbered, and it just feels really satisfying to level Kirby up and have that finishing attack on Wispy Woods, where it's not just kind of wailing on him over and over again. You have to do things prior before you can even level Kirby up, which I thought was a pretty interesting boss fight, and yay, Wispy Woods gets to be on this list. Next up we have Planet Robobot, and I chose the DDD clones and D3. It's kind of a two-part battle where first you're fighting tons of clones of King DDD, and it can be kind of stressful as a lot of them are just going back and forth on the stage slamming hammers and doing jump attacks, and obviously they get into a giant mech, and it's really cool how they work kind of a three-dimensional aspect in a 2D boss battle, where they're kind of driving this machine around a giant circle and on different lit up paths where you have to pay attention to where all the attacks are coming from. He'll shoot from the background, from the sides of the stage, from the foreground. It's really interesting how this boss battle just kind of utilizes a bigger space than what's being able to be seen. Now, being completely honest, I never got to get super far in the Kirby Clash games. I've definitely got to get to that eventually. Not being able to choose King D Mine because he's a final boss made this kind of difficult, but I decided to go with Dark Tyranza. The original Tyranza wasn't that difficult, and looking at gameplay of the Dark Tyranza looked pretty daggone exciting. Considering the fact that you never fight him in Triple Deluxe and he's like one of the main antagonists of that game, it's pretty weird, but you finally get to fight him here, and he has tons of really powerful, really cool attacks as he flies through the foreground to the background and warps around using elemental and plasma based attacks. It looks like a lot of fun. Yeah, I definitely got to get to this game. And yes, I know this could technically be considered a final boss as it's one of the few bosses to end the game. For Kirby's Blowout Blast, it definitely goes to Krakow because some new things happen with this boss battle that we've never seen. It creates a giant thunderstorm all around the stage where his eyeball is just floating in the middle of it, which is definitely very different than anything we've seen before. Krakow's Revenge just takes it up a notch by adding new attacks and quicker ones at that, and obviously having a giant gap in the middle of a smaller stage makes this a lot more difficult. But yeah, I just love the fact how it can turn into this one giant thunderstorm. It makes it all really interesting and something really different for the boss battle. For Kirby's Battle Royale, outside of Meta Knight and the final King DDD boss battle, the only other ones we had to choose from is Robo Bonkers. So yeah, Robo Bonkers. Now there's like 3 different versions of this boss fight, but all you want to do is pretty much grab missiles and chuck them into the cannon in order to knock him over, which will then cause his defeat. Now you can knock enemies into the cannon as well, but yeah, that's pretty much as far as it goes. There's not much else to say about this one. It's not that interesting, and it's just okay. It overall just feels like a giant Mario Party mini game, which is still not terrible, but as far as this game goes, I really wish there was more like giant metal versions of different enemies or mini bosses from the Kirby series outside of just Bonkers. Now for Kirby Star Allies, I picked a strange one. Yep, I picked Grand Maelm just because it's very unique. Now you don't even fight this boss within the regular campaign. You actually fight it in the side mode Far-Flung Starlight Heroes, and this is a different take on a boss battle. So in order to even harm her, you have to do a combination of things. So first you actually have to cut the string off of her bomb hand that she fires at you, and then you have to switch to a character that can then ignite it in order to blow up the bomb, blowing up her armor as well, then allowing you to wail on Grand Maelm. Just fighting this boss with the Friend Star is really cool, and I'm personally not a big fan of the boss battles from Kirby Star Allies, where I feel like a lot of them can be gimped with a specific ability. This one has a set way to defeat her with specific battle conditions, and I just really enjoyed that. Once again, I never did get to play all the way through Super Kirby Clash, but that's okay because right away I'll tell you right now, it's definitely Parallel Nightmare. The fact that this boss hasn't returned in over 30 years is nuts, and we finally got the return of Nightmare in a grand way with tons of new attacks that references his old boss battle. It's just all around a shocking and fun experience to fight him nevertheless. You do fight him over and over again throughout the course of this game, which you do every boss, so it's not really a big deal, but I really did enjoy fighting Nightmare once again. For Kirby Fighters 2, there's really only 3 boss battles. One of them is just 2 Wispy Woods, and the other is 2 Duo Edges, which are literally just mini bosses, so I had to choose Shadow Kirby. It's actually a lot of fun to fight a copy of Kirby, and it kind of just makes it feel like Smash Brothers, but a new kind of moveset and, you know, control scheme type of Smash Brothers, like a Kirby Smash Brothers if anything. Yeah, I really did enjoy this. It's nowhere near that difficult at all, and lots of the time it'll just kind of walk away from you, but still, I guess it would probably still be the best of this entire game. I had a lot of fun fighting myself. And finally, for Kirby and the Forgotten Land, I wanted to do Forgo DDD, but that did kind of feel like the last final boss gauntlet, which I told you I did not want to include in this specific video, so let's just go King DDD, because this was really fun. It was a whole battle arena to fight King DDD after all these years, officially in a full-fledged 3D game, and this was a blast. He would try to hit you with jump attacks causing shockwaves, or run into you, or just smash you with his hammer, and then phase 2 is where it got super interesting, where he grabs a giant pillar and tries to slam it into you, and using that quick dodge attack is so incredibly satisfying, and then immediately attacking right after. This was a really good King DDD boss fight, and they definitely did not mess it up whatsoever. But I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Definitely let me know in the comments down below what you thought of all of these bosses on my list. If you agree, if you disagree, let me know why, and what are your favorite bosses from every single Kirby game. Thank you for tuning in, and before you head out, if you enjoy videos like this and want to see even more, because yes, I have tons more planned, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to stay up to date on all things Kirby and all things Nintendo in general, and like always, I'll see you all on the next one. See you guys.